welcome to the Courthouse, the program that gives you the opportunity to learn more about the law and gives you general legal perspectives on real-life issues. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo. This week on the Courthouse, we'll examine the age-long landlord and tenant relationship. Could the landlord always be right? Meet Barrister Destiny Takon, the principal partner of Obun Takon & Co., as he joins me in addressing this issue today. But before we do that, we'll take a quick break.
Love Plus is now on your mobile format and connects you in real time. You can now watch your favorite programs, episodes, live shows, prayer shows, features, live TV, archived videos, and lots more. You can also participate with your comments and contributions from anywhere in the world. Download on any of your mobile device, whether it's Android or iOS or Windows, the Love Plus mobile app now, and stay connected. Love Plus.
You're welcome back. Like I said earlier, I have a guest with me to do justice to this topic. He is a principal partner of Destiny Obun Takon Chambers and is here with me in the studio. Barrister Destiny Takon, you're welcome.
Thank you, Tohan, and good day, viewers. Good to be here again.
Okay, so like we said, every time landlord and tenant issues, we keep hearing landlord throwing out the property of his tenants or harassing them in one way or the other. So generally, what's your take on the relationship between the landlord and the tenants, especially in Nigeria?
Yeah, thanks very much. Of course, the landlord and tenant relationship is one that is jealously guarded at law. Okay. It is an estate contract between the landlord and the tenant. Okay. Of course, when you hear contract, it means that there's something binding. It's a binding relationship. Okay, an agreement. Yeah, definitely between the landlord and the tenant. Kernel to all of this is the fact that the possession of the tenant must have been lawful possession. Okay. That's lawful to say, possession. Yes, he's in lawful possession of the premises. Okay. A person who is not in lawful possession of a premises cannot be said to be a tenant. Okay. So any person who is in lawful possession of a premises, basically putting it, reducing it more to say that the person entered or took possession with the consent of the landlord. With the consent of the landlord. Yes, that makes it a lawful possession. Okay. And once that happens, the person becomes a tenant, whether or not the person pays rent. Whether or not the person pays rent. It is immaterial. Okay, so based on what you just said, there's this scenario that I would like you to see of a landlord throwing out the property of his tenants, and another scenario of a landlord just pasting an eviction notice at the door, just saying, time up. Leave my house and all that. Not a proper notice, or what you would not call a proper notice. So let's take a look at that scenario. It's
okay. What is this cleaner, gardener doing? This place is super grown.
My God, like that. It can only be you.
Why is that light on?
Oga Jonah, I will not sleep again.
And you honestly feel you are okay with this light on at this time, at a time like this?
Am I supposed to put off my lights because you are the landlord, or don't I pay for it? Hey, see, wahala. Because I'm living in your house, I won't sleep again. I won't go and drop off. Please, Oga Jonah,
it's all right. It's all right. Thank you very much. This young lady, look at, can't you see the place? Hey, look at even your environment.
What is wrong with my environment? Is it not clean enough? It's okay. See, this Baba, I don't like it too. I don't like it too. You will come, charge me exorbitant bills. I will pay you electricity, pay you security bills. In fact, pay you all the bills. Are you not tired? Do you want to finish my money? Let me sleep 3/4 and
do the right thing. You don't do it. Put off your light, you will not. Clean your environment, you will not. And here you.
If you want to leave, I will leave your house when my rent expires.
Okay.
I will use my light.
Okay.
Okay. Don't come bang on my door.
All right. This is the last time. For the last time. It's okay. It's all right. Go inside the place. Anything you see, send them out. Bring out everything. Bring everything out. Idiot boy. Throw them out. Throw them out. Out! Out everything. Everything. More than 3 months. Eviction notice. Everything. Throw them out.
What's going on here, sir?
What do you want to know?
These are my documents. Why are you doing this to me, sir?
Do you know about this? Get out. Pack your things and go. Quick notice. 6 months notice. Nonsense.
Wow, what an interesting scenario, or scenarios that we just saw. We saw the one of the landlord harassing the tenants. You're always putting on your lights, you're always doing this and doing that. Then the other one of the landlord throwing out the property of his tenants. So Barrister Takon, what do you make of those scenarios we just saw?
Well, exactly why I would like to use the legacy government where we are.
Okay.
Had to enact the tenancy law.
Tenancy law
Yes,
in Lagos
to deal.
State.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
To deal with such situations as what we just saw.
Okay.
It's called more or less a law. We say the mischief. You know, that's the mischief that led to the law.
Okay, the mischief of the landlord this time around.
That's right. It's
okay.
Usually, of course, in this relationship, the tenant is the vulnerable party.
Okay.
You know, amongst the two. So, and this has been going on for as old as you can think of people owning houses. So gradually, too, the law has been evolving to protect the tenant. In this relationship, the tenant is more protected because, as I said, he is, permit me to use he to apply to both sexes, the vulnerable party. You know,
vulnerable party.
Yeah, as far as this is this relationship is concerned. So, you have a situation where landlords, for a young lady was involved there.
Yes.
A male landlord, of course, who probably was making advances to female landlord, female tenant, who says no, and then he decides she's going to leave my house.
Okay.
So he starts harassing her under all sort of subterfuges. You know, comes on, complains about the light, complains about the fact that you're always cooking,
running or something,
your water is
all
sort of excuses.
So now you talked about the law protecting the tenants in Lagos State, for instance.
Yes.
So this tenant doesn't look protected. What do you make of?
Well, definitely the tenant has an option. Of course, any landlord who harasses, it's not just even when you throw out, even by mere words.
By mere words.
You harass a tenant with the view to evicting or causing that tenant, you know, to move out of the premises. Is committed an offense. Section 44 of the Tenancy Law of Lagos State deals with that.
Well, interesting. So not just inferring out the property of the tenants, harassing the tenants by words of mouth is also sufficient.
Yes.
So what's the remedy for this tenant now? What should she do? The lady in the first
contact
scenario?
a lawyer.
Contact a lawyer.
Yeah, and then of course who would know what to do. File appropriate applications. You could file an originating application at the magistrate court. You know, to ask that the court commits the landlord to prison.
Okay, what about the other scenario? Now, this landlord, he saw that probably the other tenants came to interfere or intervene in the harassment scenario we saw, and now his property is being thrown out. So what do you make of that?
It's the same thing. As a matter of fact, first of all, the tenant has a right of self-help.
Self-help.
I will not sit back. I mean, you need to know that. The fact that you're my landlord, what I owe you is rent.
Okay.
I am not subservient to you. I'm not your servant. I'm not your employee. What I owe you, the obligation of the tenant to the landlord basically is a rent. As at when due.
Okay.
So if I pay my rent, I'm entitled to what is called the right of quiet possession.
Okay, the right of
quiet possession.
Quiet possession.
Quiet possession.
Okay.
So coming to knock at my door incessantly, coming to tell me to shut the lights, you're not NEPA, let me use NEPA in Nigerian context.
Yeah.
I don't pay bills to you. If I'm keeping the lights on, then I'm incurring bills. I pay the bills to NEPA, not to you. You know, so, and several other things. You cannot do that because you're the landlord. You know, if you do that, you'll be committing trespass.
I like when you talked about the right to quiet possession. So this lady that was being harassed now, her right is being infringed.
As a matter of fact, her right of quiet possession is being infringed. The landlord is trespassing.
Okay.
It's your property, but you see, trespass protects possession. So when you proceed against a tenant who is in lawful possession, and you do those things, you're a trespasser. As a matter of fact, you walk into my apartment without notice. Usually in a tenancy agreement, there's provision for the length of notice to be given by the landlord before he can gain entrance to the apartment for purpose of inspection, and of course not incessantly, within such reasonable times or occasions.
Okay, but
now, if your landlord works, fine.
You know, you are going to the issue of notice. We have
Yes.
a report on the procedure for evicting a tenant. So I would like us to just take a look at that report. The procedure for recovery of premises is largely regulated by statutes. Accordingly, a landlord who seeks to recover his premises from a tenant must strictly comply with the provisions of these statutes. The landlord-tenant relationship has been described in the following terms.
The landlord-tenant relationship in Nigeria is more of a contractual relationship. Two parties who agree on terms, one letting out his apartment while the other is receiving based on terms and conditions contained, which both of them agreed. Though there are certain control the tenancy law places both on the landlord and the tenant, but basically it is contractual.
Every state in Nigeria has its own law on recovery of premises. On procedure for recovery of premises in Lagos State, some prominent lawyers had this to say.
First, let me start by correcting a misconception that has to do with notices and ejection of tenants. Tenants have this notion that a notice can only run from the expiration of his tenancy. That is a wide misconception. The provision is that for a monthly tenant, a weekly tenant is required to be given a week's notice. Okay. The notice must lapse at the expiration of his tenancy. But yes, 1 week. Yes, but in Lagos State today, that technicality no longer applies. As to that your notice must expire on the eve of your tenancy.
So it's not to say that I do not like you any longer by simply doing that act, but for purposes of making sure that he's not caught on the wrong side. That is why it is required that he must issue that notice.
If the tenant or any person in possession of the premises still fails, refuses or neglects to give up possession, then the landlord or his agent may apply to the appropriate court that has jurisdiction.
You must make sure that that anniversary must be before the end of the tenancy or at the end of the tenancy, but now cannot be after the end. If it goes after the end, that notice is null and void.
Where the tenant refused to yield up possession to move out from the apartment at the expiration of the notice, the landlord is to issue a further 7 days notice of his intention to recover possession through a legal process.
In Lagos and Abuja, magistrate courts have jurisdiction to sit as tribunals. You're still watching the Courthouse on this station, and I have with me Barrister Destiny Takon doing justice to the topic landlord and tenant relationship. Barrister Takon, thank you for still being here with me.
A pleasure.
We just heard a report on the procedure for properly evicting a tenant in Nigeria. So can you just generally highlight the procedure for us in Lagos State?
The summary of it is basically that the tenant must, depending on the nature of the tenancy, has to issue a notice to quit.
Notice to quit.
Yes, which the tenure or the term, the length of that notice is determined by the nature of the tenancy. If it's a weekly tenant, the tenant is entitled to a week's notice.
Okay.
If it's a monthly tenant, it's entitled to a month's notice. If it's a quarterly tenant, that is 3 monthly, it's entitled to a quarter's notice. If it's a half-yearly tenant, that is 6 months, it's entitled to 3 months' notice. If it's a yearly tenant, it's entitled to 6 months' notice.
6 months' notice.
Yes, but also there's another scenario. If it is a fixed term, a term certain at law, which is a lease, for instance, for 2 years,
okay,
and the 2 years have expired, you don't issue a quit notice anymore. What you issue is simply a 7 days notice, which is called, the rightful name is a notice of owner's intention to apply to recover possession.
Okay.
So that's what you give. In that scenario, you don't issue a notice to quit.
Okay.
So that's the first step. Now, where a notice to quit applies, when that notice expires, then the landlord will have to follow up with a 7 days notice, which is just what I mentioned in the case of leases.
Okay.
You have to follow up with that. Now, when the 7 days expire, and they must expire, otherwise, this procedure, whatever you do at court, no matter how long the matter lasted, is going to be invalidated. If any of this, the time frame, the length of notice falls short. Now, after the 7 days notice, then you apply to court. And then the tenant is expected to show up and defend the action.
And defend the action in court.
Yes.
But you said if there's an error in any of the notice, or if the notice is not valid, then whatsoever procedure or process the landlord institutes will be invalid.
Yes. In fact, that goes, if we had enough time, I'm going to tell you that within the notices, the notice must describe, the property, the nature of the tenancy.
Okay.
All of that has to be inclusive. And then, of course, I've seen our colleagues in several matters I've handled. Some of our colleagues make the mistake of having to sign a quit notice in the name of their firm.
In the name of their firm?
In the name of their firm.
So how is a quit notice supposed to be signed?
A legal practitioner should issue it and sign it, not the firm.
Not the firm?
Yes. And so you see a situation where you say, we, for we, that's Noble Takon and Co. That's a bad notice,
Bad notice.
And a lot of people do that.
So if that is a bad notice, what will you call the eviction notice we just saw? Just 2 words, eviction notice, and the landlord says, I've issued you a notice, leave my house.
It's a bundle of illegalities. that's basically, they're twin brothers or in illegality. So it doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
You do that, you go to, and then it's taken up against you, you go to jail. In fact, even the fine is not, the fine is about 250,000 naira in Lagos State. If I told the court decides to give you a fine, otherwise you go to prison for 6 months.
Wow. So it's even an offense that could lead the landlord into
it's a strict liability one, as a matter of fact. The law, as I said, guards the relationship between the landlord and tenant jealously.
Okay.
Given the mischief, that has attended this relationship in the past.
So in that regard now, that there are a lot of cases in courts, and we keep hearing adjournments. So what is the guarantee that if a tenant institutes an action against the landlord, for instance, for throwing out the property or for harassing him or her, what's the guarantee that that matter will be heard in time?
Well, the various, whether it depends on whether the matter is pending for the magistrate court or the high court.
Okay.
The courts have tried severally, through legal engineering to speed up processes. Especially Lagos has been at the forefront all over the country. Right. That is known. I mean, it's been like that for a very long time.
Okay.
Occasionally churning out new civil procedure rules. The very essence is to ensure that matters in court, are determined as speedily as possible. Whichever way, the judicial process must be followed. The times when holidays come, when either the judge or magistrate is indisposed health-wise, there's nothing you can do about it. So it's really not possible to give a time frame, say, if I start a recovery matter or I file a matter against my landlord for harassment or for what other purpose that is going to be determined within so period of time.
All right.
But basically, as I said, the rules have been evolving to ensure that matters are dispensed with speedily.
Okay. I think in Lagos State, I thought there were some specialized courts, maybe like the Rent Appeal Tribunal or something like that.
Yes, that used to be, but now they are all be subsumed under the magistrate courts.
Okay.
Yeah, the magistrate courts handle it. We don't have rent tribunals anymore.
All right.
Yes, depending on some claim, you either go to the magistrate court or the high court. But basically, and then also, of course, the tenancy laws doesn't apply to all of Lagos. Okay. Some places like Ikoyi, Ikeja GRA, Victoria Island, for instance, are excluded from the operation of the tenancy law.
Why?
Well, that is the law for now.
So the law is excluding some. Okay, yes. So I would just like you to give a word of advice to my friend, the lady who was being harassed by the landlord, and the man whose property got thrown out.
Oh, well, for her, as I said, you can contact a lawyer, let him file an action, yes, for the landlord to be committed to prison under Section 44 of the tenancy law. Right. For the tenant whose property is thrown out, as a matter of fact, if he can do it without occasioning a breach of the peace, he can break back even if that door is locked.
Can break back?
Back into the premises. Okay. Because the eviction is illegal. Note what I said. If he can do it without occasioning a breach of the peace, you know, because it is
breaking and entry.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it wouldn't be an offense.
Okay.
In the first instance, he's being thrown out of the premises was illegal, so he has a right to be there. So if he's thrown out illegally, he has a right to get back there. You know, so long as he's going back there does not, if he can ensure that doesn't cause a breach of the peace. Maybe get the police, if they would understand what really happened, let them be on hand while you break whatever is there and get back into the premises. Alternatively, because if you're going to go to court, it's going to take a lot of time before it will be determined. But of course, where that happens, depending on what choices you make, you're entitled, of course, to sue the landlord. You know, take a civil suit against him for wrongful eviction, definitely malicious damage. You know, the way when eviction is done, properties are not handled carefully. They yank them and throw them away. You know, so you can sue for damages to your property and then general damages as well. All of that you can, you know, proceed against the landlord for.
All right, thank you very much, Barrister Destiny Takon.
My pleasure.
And I believe you viewers out there, you are enjoying this show because we've really had enough insight into this landlord and tenant relationship today. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back.
When there is an event,
there will be reportage on what, when,
where, how, and why.
We relay the news as they happen. Our perspective on global business stories.
Sports headlines from around the globe.
This
is Level Plus
News,
keeping you credibly informed.
This morning on Level Plus. Weekdays, 8 a.m. on this station.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Courthouse on this station, and you just saw the Bar Book. Bar Book is the segment that gives you the opportunity to learn some Latin maxims and their meanings. So, Barrister Destiny Takon, I would want to ask you, what is your favorite maxim? What's your favorite Latin maxim?
The question? All right, maybe I'd say Nemo that quote non-hibit.
Wow. Could you
For
say
me,
that
I
louder?
think
I didn't get that.
Nemo that quote non-hibit.
Nemo that
quote
non-habit.
Non-hibit.
Okay,
what that
mean?
means actually is that you cannot give what you don't have.
You cannot give what you don't have.
What you don't have. I think it is much more central to jurisprudence, you know, or to rights and obligations. That's why I'm picking it out, you know, among several, you know, thousands of legal maxims, Latin maxims.
Okay.
That's because, of course, as I said, it's very central, especially given in a part of the world where people do lots and lots of things. You know, you buy land, for instance, and you're given a deed of assignment, you know, which of course actually transfers title to you, not a receipt. The receipt is only evidence of payment. You know, so when you buy land and you have a receipt, you don't really have, it's an equitable title you have. It's not a legal title.
An equitable title.
Yes, when you get a deed of assignment and then proceed to perfect it, you know, because it is the deed of assignment that transfers title from your predecessor in title to you. You know, so if you pass title to me and I perfect my title and I travel and you know, sell that property as they often do, the moneyless often do, to somebody else. If he likes, let him put up a Union Bank headquarters building there, and I come back, I'll go to court, and because what the Union Bank, the man who built the Union Bank, second Union Bank headquarters building, you know, did, he had nothing. The man had passed title to me, and at the time he sold to him, he had no more title, so he gave him nothing. Title resides with me.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's second scenario and several others, you know, really endear that maxim to me, you know, because what you don't have,
you cannot give.
The law, I mean, it's so sacrosanct. I love it. I love it a lot.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's the much we can take on the Court's House for this week, and I hope you learned a lot from today's topic. For comments and updates, do visit www.lovewordplus.org or download our app, LoveWord Plus. I am Olomu-Agbodo. Remember, don't just get mad, go get a lawyer. Bye for now.